Good morning. I'm Stephanie Ramos. Thanks for streaming with us. Concerns are growing for the economy, with investors bracing for a major interest rate hike. The Fed today expected to issue its biggest increase in decades to help fight soaring inflation. What it means for the housing market, credit cards, and your family finances. Also ahead, developments in the battle against COVID. An FDA panel today considering 2 vaccines for kids as young as 6 months old, when the shots could be available for 18 million children. Plus, the new court decision in the detention of WNBA star Brittney Griner in Russia. What we're learning about a new extension to her time behind bars. But we begin with those mounting concerns about the economy. President Biden is feeling the heat and getting increasingly frustrated with Republicans who he says are blocking his plans to lower prices. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is expected to announce a major hike in interest rates to battle rising inflation. But that move is also sparking fears of a recession that would hurt American families. Business reporter Alexis Christoforous and White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks join me live now. Alexis here. This could be the largest rate hike in nearly 3 decades. Is that right? What can we expect?
I think we can expect the Fed to make its boldest move yet in its fight against inflation. Stephanie, we're expecting an interest rate hike of 3/4 percentage point. That would be the highest since 1994, as this Fed continues to try to cool consumer demand and to also bring those high inflation numbers lower.
And how could this affect Americans' bank account? I know we talk about mortgage rates, credit cards, but how else will Americans feel this rate hike?
Well, I think they're going to start feeling it immediately the moment they start to borrow money. So you're right to say credit cards, also auto loans, home equity lines of credit, small business loans, and as you mentioned, mortgages as well. I just want to spend one moment on mortgages because they have nearly doubled since the beginning of the year, topping 6% for the first time in about a decade this past week. And what does that mean in terms of real dollars? Well, if you had taken out a $400,000 mortgage January 1st, that would have cost you $1,745 a month. Today, with where mortgage rates are, that same house would cost you $620 more, or there you have it, $2,365 more a month. So this is really taking a big chunk out of household budgets.
This is incredible. Let's bring in Mary Alice Parks in Washington. Mary Alice, what specifically is the president accusing Republicans of blocking?
Yeah, Stephanie, the president has been frustrated that he hasn't been able to pass some of his key economic priorities. And he's trying to bring that up again to voters, because like you said, he is so aware that voters are really frustrated with him. His approval rating slipping so much because of these economic numbers. Only 37% of Americans approve of his handling of the economic recovery. And so he's saying, look, I'm trying to pass some stuff that I think would help. He's bringing up the fact that he's been pushing for a minimum corporate tax rate, and Republicans blocked that. He's continuing to talk about the bills he has sponsored and that he's backing that would limit the amount of money Americans can spend on prescription drugs. But the reality is it is hard to see any of those big ticket items making it through Capitol Hill over the summer. And so he's really sort of just trying to shift the narrative back to Republicans and saying they're the ones that are keeping us from being able to do some of these things we were hoping to do.
Right, and polls are showing this. Polls show Americans are placing the blame on President Biden for these soaring prices. But how much power does the president really have over inflation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the president says that he's continuing to view this as his top priority, but also starting to say that he's not sure what else he can do. I mean, they're talking about things that they've worked on that contribute to high prices, that contribute to inflation, you know, supply chain issues, the fact that they worked a lot on trying to get ports in this country back up and running after the pandemic. They talk about the money, the big dumps they did from the strategic petroleum reserves. But at the end of the day, I mean, inflation rates are not up to this White House. And it's part of the reason that everyone here in Washington is looking forward and looking to that Fed meeting later today.
Right. Thank you, Mary Alice. Alexis, there's a lot of talk about a recession. What are the odds that we could slip into a recession, and how can people protect their money if we do?
With a very great questions, and with a very aggressive Fed, the odds of a recession are now rising. A lot of Wall Street firms are putting that odd at 50-50 for a recession in the next 12 to 18 months. If that were to happen, it's important not to let sort of your emotions get the best of you. Don't panic. If you have outstanding debt, especially credit card debt, the best thing you can do is start to bring that debt down now so that you are saving whatever money you can, because paying off that debt is going to get more expensive. And also try to get a household budget in order, and then try to stick to that budget as hard as it is, and really prioritize things that you need versus things you want. Maybe buying that home right now, buying a new car, taking that big trip. Maybe now is not the time as you try to hunker down.
As I try to plan a summer trip, I'll keep that in mind. Those are really good tips.
But just to keep in mind, right?
Yeah.
Just to keep your spending in check.
Yeah, very good advice. Mary Alice, what more can the administration do to try and lower prices?
Yeah, they're looking at possibly curbing some tariffs from goods imported from China. And of course, there's a lot of focus right now on the president's upcoming trip to Saudi Arabia and whether that could make a difference on oil prices. But the president's under pressure to try to think of what else he can do to try to make a difference here.
Ladies, thank you so much. Tackling a lot this morning. Alexis, thank you for being in studio with us. And Mary Alice in Washington, thank you. Now to the latest in the pandemic. The FDA panel is meeting today to consider 2 vaccines for children as young as 6 months old. ABC's Whit Johnson is at a drugstore here in New York where some of America's youngest kids could soon be getting those shots. Hi, Whit.
Stephanie, a decision today would impact 18 million young kids, the last group of Americans still not eligible for a COVID vaccine. This FDA panel is expected to meet, review the data, and then vote on whether to recommend authorization on 2 different vaccines, one from Pfizer, one from Moderna, possibly making a shot available for those young kids between 6 months and 5 years old for the very first time. Now, the FDA has already said that both vaccines appear to be safe and effective. Pfizer's vaccine is given as a 3-shot series. The company's early data showed it was 80% effective in preventing symptomatic COVID. Moderna's vaccine is a 2-dose series, and early data showed it was about 40 to 50% effective at preventing mild infections. The effectiveness against more severe illness is still not yet known. Now, it's important to point out that this efficacy data for both vaccines is still preliminary and based on small sample sizes, and experts say that both vaccines do produce similar antibodies against Omicron as in adult vaccines, but come in smaller doses for young kids. Now, if the FDA independent panel votes in favor of authorization, there's still a few more steps here before it ultimately goes to the CDC director. She would give the final green light. If she does, those shots could start rolling out as soon as next Tuesday. But it's still not clear what demand will be for these vaccines. A recent survey found only 1 in 5 parents of this younger age group are ready to get their children vaccinated right away. Stephanie?
Whit, thank you so much. We have some breaking news from the Justice Department now. Federal prosecutors have charged the suspect in the Buffalo supermarket mass shooting with 26 counts of federal hate crimes. The charges come as Attorney General Merrick Garland visits the scene of the crime and meets with families of the victims. There you see him arriving. 10 black people were killed when a gunman opened fire at a Tops grocery store on May 14th. The 18-year-old suspect has pleaded not guilty. He is the first person in the state of New York history to be charged with domestic terrorism motivated by hate. Well, today marks the 10-year anniversary for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, also known as the DACA program. It was on this date that DACA was established by the Obama administration in 2012. Meanwhile, we are waiting for a decision from the Supreme Court on whether or not the Biden administration unlawfully terminated Trump's policy to keep migrants and asylum seekers in Mexico with what is formally known as the Migrant Protection Protocol. Executive Director at the National Immigration Law Center, Maria Elena Incapi, joins me now live for more on this. Thank you so much, Maria Elena, for being here. Justices are currently deciding the legality of the repeal of the Trump-era policy, which was created to send unauthorized immigrants, including asylum seekers, back to Mexico while their cases were being processed in an immigration court. President Biden tried to end that Remain in Mexico policy last year, but it was reinstated. What decision are you hoping for?
Yes, thank you for the invitation, Stephanie. So as you mentioned, as we are celebrating the 10th year anniversary of DACA today, we are very anxiously also awaiting a number of decisions from the Supreme Court. I think the important thing is we don't have a decision yet, but what we do know is that this country has a long and rich history of welcoming people who are seeking refuge in our country. People have the legal right, both under U.S. law and international law, to seek asylum when they fear persecution for a number of protected reasons. The last administration, frankly, tried to shut the door on Black and brown migrants coming to the United States, and that has created a challenging situation at the U.S.-Mexico border. We believe and hope that the Supreme Court will find that the Biden administration properly terminated that program so that we can once again be a nation of rule of law that allows people to use the legal process to seek asylum in a safe and orderly way.
And Maria Elena, so many people are protected by the DACA program. According to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, 835,000 people here in the U.S. are protected by DACA. And on the 10-year anniversary, recipients are still calling for congressional action as immigration reforms remain stalled. And of course, President Biden this morning, even posting on Twitter, he urged Congress to make this permanent. What more needs to be done to make this a reality?
Yeah, so, today is a really a wonderful day to pause and to see. This is an example of when government works at its best. For the last decade, DACA has been a successful and transformative policy that has protected hundreds of thousands of young immigrants who grew up in the United States. This is their home country. They are American at heart. And while the only thing they have is this temporary protection, they've been living their lives every 2 years at a time, right? Wondering, will the program be ended? Will they be put into deportation processes? The last administration, the Trump administration, tried to terminate the program and put young Americans, right? Americans at heart, citizens in waiting, into deportation. What we see right now is that this program has been so transformative. It has allowed young immigrants to pursue their work and educational goals, to provide for themselves and their families, to buy cars, buy houses, pursue jobs that are essential to our country in this moment. Many of them are working in essential industries, healthcare workers, right? Folks who were essential during the pandemic, for example. But this was temporary. We knew from the very beginning that this was a temporary protection from deportation, and that what we need is actually for Congress to finally act and provide a permanent solution, which means putting these young immigrants on a path to citizenship so that they can be full citizens and be able to continue contributing to their families, our communities, and our country.
Exactly. Dreamers still waiting for that. And I found this to be really interesting that top White House officials will be meeting with Dreamers today for discussions on preserving DACA. How important is it that they have a seat at the table during these conversations?
Oh, absolutely, Stephanie. Listen, we at the National Immigration Law Center have been working to seek a permanent solution since 2001. So 21 years, we helped to draft the DREAM Act. We have worked with supporting immigrant youth leaders, but it wasn't until they themselves, as protagonists in this fight, fought for and achieved this DACA program under the Obama administration that we saw such a successful program. We at the National Immigration Law Center also worked with them within a decade ago, right? Obama announced it, and on Saturday morning, the next day, we rolled up our sleeves and started working to implement this program successfully. So immigrant youth have been at the table every moment, and it's their life that's at stake. So absolutely, it's wonderful to see that President Biden and the White House is going to be meeting with these young leaders who are currently playing such a critical role in our country, and they're also part of our future leaders in the country.
Their voices being heard today. Maria Elena Incapia from the National Immigration Law Center, thank you so much. And I think I got it right that time. I hope.
You got it. Incapia, yes. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thanks. Well, coming up, President Zelensky is pleading for more aid to Ukraine as Russian forces gain ground, possibly on the brink of taking a key city. The latest from Ukraine when we come back. Welcome back. Now to the latest on the war in Ukraine. Today, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is hosting a meeting in Brussels with dozens of his counterparts from NATO countries to discuss sending additional aid to Ukraine. This as President Zelensky pleads for more weapons as Russian forces gain ground, potentially on the verge of taking a key city. Our foreign correspondent James Longman has the latest from Ukraine.
As Ukraine tries to hold off the overwhelming Russian force in the east, President Zelensky with a plea for more military help from the West. He says he's grateful for what's come so far, but it must come faster. Now, new satellite images show bridges surrounding Severodonetsk, the epicenter of the fighting, destroyed, cutting the city off. In Provilia, to the north of the Severodonetsk, police rush to evacuate civilians as bombs fall around them. One resident says evacuation buses can't reach the town because of the shelling. Police evacuate people on their own. Here in the east, we're taken to defensive positions back from the front lines. We meet Vitaly, a member of an elite civil defense unit. He says the weapons they have now aren't enough to keep the Russians at bay, saying we need more than an AK-47 to go up against heavy artillery and tanks. There are still some victories here. This T-80 Russian tank recently captured by Ukrainian forces.
So this is a Russian tank which has been commandeered by the Ukrainians. We've got a commander and a targeter here who are really proud to show it off because it's much more modern than anything the Ukrainians have got.
But even with the sounds of artillery all around, these soldiers still refuse to be subdued.
How do you smile? Why are you smiling? You seem like a smiling person. This is like a hard thing to be doing. You're naturally positive.
Sounds like being positive is the last thing we have left here.
This gives you an idea of just what Russia is capable of. NATO have just announced that they will be sending more military aid to Kyiv. The big question, will it be enough? And will it get here in time to stop more of this country looking like this? Stephanie?
Thank you for that update, James. Russia has extended the pretrial jail time for WNBA star Brittney Griner until at least July 2nd. It's another disappointing setback for Griner's family, friends, and teammates, as no real explanation was offered for the latest delay. Chief Global Affairs anchor Martha Raddatz is in Washington with the latest.
Frustration growing for WNBA star Brittney Griner after a new setback. A Russian court now extending her detention through at least July 2nd. Griner now in custody 118 days.
This case is problematic from top to bottom. It is precisely why we have characterized Brittney Griner as a wrongful detainee.
Griner's teammates and coaches on the Phoenix Mercury meeting with members of the State Department this week as they work to secure her release.
You know, we're here to do whatever we can to make sure we amplify, keep BG at the forefront of the things that we want to do, which is more important than, you know, any basketball game and anything else that's going on in our lives.
The NBA also working to keep Griner's case front and center. Celtics players seen wearing "We Are BG" shirts before their playoff game. State Department officials saying they are working around the clock to free the WNBA star after she was detained at an airport near Moscow in February, where Russian authorities accused her of carrying hashish oil in her luggage, an offense punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Griner's wife, Sherelle, telling our Robin Roberts she's trying to stay strong while she waits for Griner's return.
Every single day matters for me to be sound, for me to be alert, for me to be attentive, to make sure that she comes back, you know, but it's hard. It's hard.
Griner, one of multiple Americans detained in Moscow, former Marine Paul Whelan, still in custody after 3 years. But Trevor Reed finally freed in April. Reed, who spent nearly 3 years in a Russian prison, was freed as part of a prisoner exchange. He's calling on the U.S. to do more to bring Griner and Paul Whelan home, saying every day in a Russian prison is a nightmare. Stephanie?
And a story we'll continue to stay on top of. Thank you so much, Martha. Coming up, the group taking on body shaming and body dysmorphia in the gay community, one TikTok at a time. Welcome back to ABC News Live. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been transferred to a maximum security prison, according to Russia's state media, who cites the chairman of the Regional Public Oversight Commission. His allies raised the alarm after discovering he was no longer in the prison where he had been serving his sentence. Navalny's spokesperson says they haven't been able to confirm this, but called the new prison a, quote, monstrous place, even by Russia's standards. Navalny was arrested when he returned to Russia last year after he alleges the Kremlin tried to kill him in a nerve agent attack. More than a dozen children were injured when an inflatable bounce house fell over at a Long Island park on Tuesday. The kids were at the park for an end of the school year field day when the bounce house packed with 6- and 7-year-olds inside toppled over. Thankfully, all of the injuries appear to be minor. And it's the end of an era. Microsoft will shut down Internet Explorer today, 27 years after the company first debuted the browser. Starting today, if you open the application, you'll be directed to Microsoft Edge, the company's newer browser. It is Pride Month, and today we're taking a closer look at body shaming and body dysmorphia in the LGBTQ+ community. Gay men make up 42% of men with eating disorders. And our Gio Benitez has more on the young gay men tackling the issue, one TikTok at a time.
People talk about my weight because of how skinny I am.
They are the TikTokers taking on body shame.
Muscle dysmorphia is a major issue.
A growing number of gay men are publicly pushing back against what they call bullying within the gay community over how they look.
I've had someone actually say, if you lost a little bit more weight, I think we could go on a date.
A study showed gay men had lower body esteem scores, higher rates of eating disorders, and greater concerns for physical attractiveness compared to straight men. Nico Cassidy grew up as an overweight kid in upstate New York, but once he got to college, body expectations led him to extreme dieting.
You're so gay, you're fat. It's definitely deep-rooted with shame from childhood and just to be who we are. And I think that shame kind of comes out and portrayed as like a little bit more of a superficial vibe.
Sam Coffey posts his body with pride, calls himself full-figured and body positive.
And there is an unwritten and kind of unspoken Adonis complex that happens, especially within American gay culture.
Experts point to social media and dating apps affecting all of us, gay and straight. One study showed digital comparisons led to users feeling worse about themselves.
The pursuit of the ideal body or the pursuit of perfection can certainly be damaging, can lead to depression, anxiety, self-esteem issues.
Nico and Sam say they hope speaking out will help change perspective.
The one thing that I've learned is to just confront things as they happen, because if you actively are working on yourself, you will always have hardships to overcome, but you'll always be the best you can be.
My relationship with my body, I feel it's a growing relationship. I'm getting used to me.
And experts say some of the most helpful tips are to reduce your time on social media and redirect your focus to something else. But of course, Stephanie, that is easier said than done.
Our thanks to Gio Benitez for that report. That'll do it for us. I'm Stephanie Ramos. Stay with us right here on ABC News Live. We continue with more news, context, and analysis.
For decades, this great leader, often at Dr. King's side, was denied his rightful place in history because he was openly gay. No medal can change that, but today we honor Bayard Rustin's memory by taking our place in his march towards true equality, no matter who we are or who we love.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.